Welcome to the Rise to Shine podcast with Noelle Custis, where we ignite the spark to discover your favorite self. It is time to get real, ladies. Welcome, friends, to another episode of the Rise to Shine podcast. I'm your host, Noelle Custis. Well, before we get started, let's talk review, shall we? First of all, from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank those of you that have not only taken the time to listen, but have also taken the time to review the podcast. I know as a woman, we get so busy in our lives. We have good intentions, and maybe you've even thought like, oh, I'm going to take a moment to write a little something, but then we have dinner burning on the stove. Or maybe you listen to this podcast as you're driving in your car and you think you'll do it later and life gets the best of you. I get it. It's not always easy to take an extra few minutes to do that in the moment. So if you have, thank you so much. And if you haven't, I get it. It is okay. But I would like to mention that through this new journey, I am learning a ton about podcasting and how it all works. And one thing that I found out is that the more reviews that we get, the more this show is actually pushed out to others. And for me, if anything, I really would just love to serve other women. So whoever needs to to hear these episodes, I am always praying about that. I am always hoping it gets into the hands or the ears of women that need to hear that. So I would just really love for those of you that would like to write a review and take the time to do that to make sure that I'm doing a little something for you. So with that being said, every solo episode, I am going to be giving away a coffee or tea on me, and that will be happening throughout the summer. So it's just a little extra incentive for those of you that would like to do that. And of course, we always give a little shout out. So you can put that review on any of the favorite platforms that you listen to, and you'll be entered to win. And in addition to that, I wanted to let you know that it is also just a true blessing because, we oftentimes will see that our family and our friends are listening, but when we start to see that people we have never met before are tuning in, it really is such a beautiful thing. I always say that podcasting is probably one of my favorite things, best decisions I have ever made in this lifetime. So today's lucky winner is LaQuinta Ash. And she writes, so completely grateful to hear these conversations that can sometimes be difficult. Love listening to Noelle. So see, it's just as simple as that, and it means so much. It makes such a difference. And again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I am honored to step into this podcasting world, and I'm even more honored to spread a little love and light into this world. So make sure, LaQuinta Ash, if that is you, reach out in a DM either on Instagram or Facebook, and you will find those links in the show notes. And I cannot wait to treat you. All right. So I am going to be fully transparent with y'all. I'm tired. Now, I'm not just tired because we got back from vacation and we're still trying to get into the swing of things, or being the fact that we are remodeling our master bedroom and that is taking a toll on itself in itself. We are redoing lots of things and living, sleeping on the couch, living out of our son's room, living out of our daughter's room, all of the things. Yes, that adds an element of being tired, but that is not what I'm referring to today. You guys, I am absolutely exhausted by the constant noise of social media and this relentless pressure to have an opinion on every single political issue and the overwhelming need to feel like we have to be liked by everyone. And it's in these moments of this whole like digital overload that I realize I'm not alone in feeling this way. So let me preface this. I am actually recording this episode on July 23rd. So by the time this airs in the next week or two, I have no idea what will be happening in this world. So we're just going to keep it in context with that space. Now, please note this is not going to be a political recording. This is not going to be a political episode, but it is definitely what brought me to really feeling like I needed to talk about this because I feel like there are just in the conversations I've been having with friends and people, I'm realizing that there are countless women that are caught in this similar whirlwind, striving to meet the ever evolving expectations of this hyper connected world. And that, my friend, is why we're here today. So I really just want this to be a space where we can openly discuss the challenges of being a people pleaser and also explore to break free from this self imposed prison. Okay, maybe I'm being a little dramatic, but then again, maybe I'm not. Because did you know that over 75% of women report feeling the need to constantly please others, often at the expense of their own well being and happiness? Now, this staggering statistic sheds light on an issue that affects so many people around the world. Now, of course, I am speaking to women because that is my audience and I feel like it is very prevalent with women. But please know that this is prevalent with many people, not just women. People pleasing is more than just a personality trait, it's a deeply ingrained behavior that can truly have these profound negative impacts on our lives. From we could have chronic stress, we can have anxiety, we can have burnout, a loss of personal identity. It gets that big. And the need to constantly satisfy other people. It can leave us feeling overwhelmed and unfulfilled. It's really a cycle that is so difficult to break. It sounds easy, but it's not. And today we're going to approach this with hope as well, because I don't want this to be all the doom and gloom over it. But I really want this to be about how we can start exploring how to reclaim our lives if we are in this people pleasing mode, or if we know somebody that we can help that may be struggling with this. Ironically, politics and the way of the world got me spiraling a bit in the last week. I think it did for all of us, no matter where you stand. And here I am about ready to read a quote from a former president. So, Abraham Lincoln, who once wisely said, "You can please some of the people all of the time. You can please all of the people some of the time, but you cannot please all of the people all of the time." Now, this really powerful quote is going to be the central theme of our episode because it is impossible to please everyone. And it's also so important that we prioritize our needs and our happiness. I hope you will stick with me as we dive deep into the concept of people pleasing, its detrimental effects, and how to begin the journey of self empowerment and true fulfillment. So, here's the thing, it's no secret that women are often praised for their kindness and empathy. And there is a misconception of people pleasing. We're wired for connection and nurturing relationships, and that is often at the core of our identities. For many of us, being nice has been a badge of honor. Personally, I used to think it was my greatest quality. But what happened is that as I went through life, I realized that there's this fine line between being kind and sacrificing my own needs to appease others. So, who here, just curious, who here believes that the term people pleaser itself carries a negative connotation? Honestly. That is why I initially resisted the whole thing because it's really easy to dismiss it as a label for those who are overly accommodating. It's often associated with weakness or lack of assertiveness, low self esteem. And that's where some of the confusion lies. So that's where I want to really get into it because I know that people see this from different viewpoints. And I just ask that you come with an open mind as we walk through this. So, identifying people pleasing traits. So, here are some of the specific behaviors often associated with people pleasing. And it's important to note that not everyone will exhibit all of these traits, but recognizing that even a few of them can be the starting point of really starting to self reflect. That self reflection is going to be so important. And of course, this is always a great time to take those notes or just listen and just see if this resonates with you or, like I said, someone you know. So here's a little checklist of some, and there are many, but I picked out the ones that I felt like really stood out. So, always saying yes. Do you find yourself agreeing to requests or commitments even when you don't have the time or energy? Over apologizing. Are you quick to apologize even when it's not necessary? What about that fear of rejection? Does the thought of being disliked or rejected fill you with absolute dread? I mean, none of us like being rejected. None of us like feeling like we're disliked. But I'm talking about those of you that really dread it. And just honestly, it's like the thought of it just makes you have a pit in your stomach. I also want you to think about another trait, which is people focused over self focused. So, do you prioritize the needs and wants above others? I apologize. I meant to say, do you prioritize the needs and wants of others above your own? What about avoiding conflict? Do you go to great lengths to avoid disagreements or confrontations? Hello. Indecisive due to fear of opinions. Do you struggle to make decisions because you are worried about what others might think? And then difficulty expressing your needs. Do you find it challenging to communicate your wants and desires? Because you see, these behaviors, when they're combined together, this is what can start to create a cycle of self sacrifice that takes a toll on your mental and emotional well being. So, over time, people pleasing can lead to resentment, it can lead to burnout, it can lead to low self esteem. And then comes the chameleon effect. This is when people pleasing is more extreme. This is when it becomes this like all consuming habit. Okay, I want to reiterate this. The chameleon effect is more of when it becomes a habit, that's when it transforms into being a chameleon. And this is when you start to literally lose sight of your own identity and adapt to fit the mold of those around you. It is a dangerous path that can lead to serious consequences. And this is where I have to confess this was me, 100% in it. Actually, for the majority of my life, if I'm being completely honest, this is where I lived on a daily. And here were some of my biggest traits as I lived in this space. So, again, this is kind of like going above and beyond what we consider, the people pleaser. This is when you really start to lose your own identity. So, this is where we start having those blurred boundaries. I was constantly adapting to others, and my sense of personal boundaries got fuzzy, they got hazy. It became really difficult to distinguish between my needs and the expectations of others. And then I started to have an authenticity crisis. That's what I call it. What happened is I started to feel myself slipping away. I found myself questioning my own values, my own beliefs, my own opinions. Like there were times that I started to question everything that I stood for when I was around other people that influenced me. Even talking about this or thinking about this, it almost feels like a little bit of a trigger because I felt or I still like look back at it and I feel this shame because it was hard and I could feel it in myself. I could feel that I was losing my sense of identity. And let me tell you, this trigger happened in the last week because I started feeling this way again in the social media realm recently. And I'll talk about that in a bit. Another trait that started to happen as I was walking through this chameleon effect was this unintentional manipulation. And man, this is hard to talk about because while I feel like it's not always conscious, because it wasn't like a conscious decision. As a matter of fact, I read about this, I've researched it, and it's basically where I was constantly changing myself to fit in and how that can be perceived as manipulative. Because what happens is it starts to create this distrust in relationships. And then comes the dependency, relying on all of that extra validation. Well, it definitely led to unhealthy dependencies on others' approval of everything that I did, or most everything. Codependency. So there's dependency and then there's codependency. And this definitely happened in my previous marriage. The people pleasing evolved into this codependency where my self worth became reliant on someone else. Exhaustion, the constant effort to adapt and please, it got so physically exhausting and emotionally draining. And then ultimately, what ended up happening is massively low self esteem. Because, see, as you start to prioritize others' needs over your own, your self worth starts to disappear. It starts to diminish. And let me tell you, this happened too. And it really kind of makes me sad to think back to that teenager, to that woman that I was. And ladies, again, this is all about transparency and authenticity now. I'm not completely over this. Like, this is still something that pops up in my life. Obviously, this is what kind of, triggered me to do this podcast was that I still have work to do in this area. I still have to remind myself what are the strategies that I need to use to pull myself out of that. And then also, what are the things that I need to really reflect on myself? What do I need to question myself as I move forward or as I'm making decisions? All of the things. And that is where it's really crucial to recognize that the chameleon effect is really a survival mechanism. And it's like deeply rooted in this fear of rejection. And it can become this very self destructive pattern that actually prevents you from real connection and personal growth. And that's why I felt like it's so important for us to recognize it in ourselves or someone that we know, because it doesn't have to be your forever. And I certainly don't want this to be something that hinders you as you're walking into the different chapters of your life. Because, sometimes what ends up happening is you're on this path, and all of a sudden you recognize that you're really in the depths of pleasing others, or maybe you're living in that chameleon effect, and it becomes this real, or it can become a dangerous detour on this road to personal fulfillment that many of my listeners are desiring for themselves. So, when we prioritize the needs of others above our own, we risk derailing our own lives and the trajectories of them. So, I want you to imagine all of the opportunities and the dreams and passions that get put on hold while we're busy playing the role of everyone else's favorite person rather than showing up as our favorite selves. It can also really lead, as I had mentioned, some of my own traits when I was in this chameleon effect. It really created this cycle of unhealthy relationships. Because what happens is we often start to attract individuals who take advantage of our nature, of how accommodating we are, how kind we are, how nice we are. It's like having this welcome mat permanently displayed on our foreheads. And while it's noble to make people happy and, that's something that we love, it's equally important to protect your own peace of mind. But I do promise that this is not going to be all doom and gloom, my fellow people pleasers. While the road to recovery can be challenging and it might have a few potholes along the way, the destination is filled with sunshine and rainbows. Okay, maybe not literally rainbows, but you get the idea. It's filled with lots of joy. So, I just want to say it is time to ditch the people pleasing and embrace your inner selves. Embrace the superhero that you are, because you are uniquely and wonderfully made. There is no other you, and you are so worth being you. And believe me when I say the world needs you. The world needs you. So let's start to reclaim our power in this episode. Let's talk about the practical steps now that we know the traits, now that we know the harm that can be done with it, now that we know the self destructive harm that can be done when we are like this ultimate people pleaser. What we're going to do now is we're going to start talking about the steps to break free from this. And also, I want you to remember as we go through this that transformation takes time, but it is achievable. So don't be so hard on yourself, because if this is like the first time that you're really doing some self reflection and thinking, I really need to change, I really want to change, here are some of those strategies. So, self awareness. That's what I was just talking about. If you're here to just because you've been feeling in your gut, like, I'm living for everybody else, I'm not living for myself. We even get in these cycles where we start to feel resentful because, and I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but we start to feel resentful because we feel like we're giving and giving and giving, and no one is giving it back to us. So, self awareness, that's the first step to recognize your people pleasing tendencies. And this is where you can keep a journal to track your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors, and start to identify those patterns. Start to identify the traits or the triggers. Heck, let me tell you, I did not even need, I have been doing so much work around this that I didn't even need to journal this because literally this week, all I needed to notice was a few things. One, it was like The phone was it was like a magnet. I could not stop the scroll. I was reading all the comments and feeling so sick to my stomach with everything that was going on in our world. It was like every day I was afraid to wake up thinking, "Oh gosh, what are we going to learn next?" I noticed that when I was sitting like in my office working, or if I was talking on the phone, or if I was watching TV, it's like kind of in those still moments, I recognize, and this is something that happens a lot. I think it's a combination of a little anxiety, it's a little ADHD, but I noticed that my foot was like bouncing constantly and I could not stop it. I couldn't keep still and I felt so uncomfortable in my own body. The anxiousness, the wanting to make a, comment myself. Like, so let's just go back to like when I was scrolling. I would want to make a comment. I don't know if anybody else is like this. You want to make a comment, and then I find myself arguing with myself and I start to think like people need to know different information. They have the wrong information, or maybe not the wrong information, but they've got information that they need to see the other side of this. And oh my gosh, I have to be the savior to make sure that everybody has like all of the information and all of the facts, as if I really had them. I didn't, but I was like scrolling and finding different things, thinking that I was going to be the savior of helping other people make educated decisions. And then arguing with myself, going, why would I even do this? Why do I even want to get the backlash on this? And oh gosh, it's my business. I can't tell my honest opinion. I can't express my true feelings, especially when it comes to politics. But wait, I'm supposed to be authentic. And now you're starting to hear the crazy in my head. You're starting to hear the racket in my brain. That was the racket. And I realized right then and there, well, maybe not right then and there, but after a few, probably hours of this, couple days of this, I had been completely triggered and the people pleasing tendencies were front and center. And again, I'm going to chat about what I did in a moment, but if this is new to you, I'm just going to go back to saying start journaling your triggers, start journaling your thoughts, your patterns, your tendencies, and then start setting boundaries. Learn to say no without feeling guilty. Practice setting those limits in your personal and professional life because it really is okay to prioritize your own needs. It is. Because what that's going to do is it's going to start building self esteem. So challenge that negative self talk and focus on your strengths. Focus on those strengths. Stop talking so badly to yourself. I started talking so badly to myself, like questioning everything I stood for and questioning all of the things. And I thought, Noelle, stop. You're making yourself crazy. This is silly. You have to take care of you. And I'm going to get to the place where I had to start doing some self reflection with asking myself some questions as I was arguing with myself. And then there's effective communication. So this is expressing your thoughts and feelings using I statements to communicate your needs without blaming others. And this is a biggie. It's just like when my therapist had told me years ago, no one can make you feel any certain way. You have the choice to feel it. So that's why using I statements was so important to my communication. I wasn't able to blame other people. I wasn't able to blame other things. It's just like talking about the social media. I'm not going to blame the social media because I have a choice to get on there or not. I don't have a choice to control what's going on. I don't have that choice. But I do have the choice to take a step back. I do have the choice to not let it affect me the way that it was affecting me. And then that's where it goes into like seeking support. Surround yourself with those supportive people who encourage you in your growth. therapy, coaching, your mom, whoever that is, whatever that is. And then, of course, mindfulness and self care. And this was something, again, that I had to like get back into because incorporating mindfulness practices like prayer, meditation, taking a walk, doing your exercises, maybe you have a daily routine. For me, I have this golden hour method that I love to apply. But I even noticed I was getting away from that a little bit. So you have to start to prioritize that self care and those activities that recharge your energy and that recharge your energy. And then, of course, like I always say, just celebrate those small wins. Celebrate when you're like, oh my gosh, I did it. I changed that. I redirected myself. I went for that walk to get a clear head. I listened to some music. And I feel so much better because if we always remember that this is a journey and not a destination, I think it's then that we are able to have grace with ourselves to know that we're going to slip sometimes. So, as I'm talking about these things, we can't just recognize, we have to go a little deeper with understanding your patterns. So, let's just break down some of the patterns. And these are some of the things when I'm in it that I do. And again, I just picked some examples. There's so many, you guys. One is voice modulation. And you might be going, what is that? This is your tendency to adopt a higher pitched voice when you're on the phone. And you know what that suggests? It is a subconscious desire to appear smaller or less assertive. So this is a classic people pleasing tactic. Have you ever considered that? I mean, my family, especially my kids, say I do this all the time. I really do believe I do this subconsciously and I don't even realize it. So let me kind of put this into perspective because think about our mom voice. Our mom voice tends to be more sure of ourselves. We may be louder. And I'm not even talking when you're like yelling at your kids. I'm just saying in general. We're more bold, we're more firm, we're more steady. And why is that? It's because I believe that when I think about wanting to appear smaller, I believe that subconsciously as a mom, we do want to appear bigger and in control. It's our telephone voice, or maybe it's even our business voice that can get higher because we subconsciously want to appear less assertive. It doesn't mean if we were doing that consciously all the time, then it wouldn't be to appear less assertive. It would be to be less assertive. But subconsciously we want to be so sweet and so kind and oh, it's no problem. Hello. Hi. Right? Like, do you see the difference in that? And again, I don't know, maybe it's just us wanting to be sweeter. And also just remember that these all might not apply to you. It might just be one or two. But this is something that I have learned that I do, and I didn't even realize it. And another pattern is overcommitting. I think this one is definitely something that we do. It's saying yes to everything. But hear this, that can stem from a fear of disappointing others or missing out. And then that is what leads to the resentment. That is what leads to burnout. And it's our own doing. How about martyrdom? Oh, man. The martyr complex is a common trait among people pleasers because by sacrificing our own needs, we seek to get validation, we seek to avoid conflict. And this, my friends, is a pattern of women in my family, especially on my grandmother's side. No offense, grandma, but it is. It's just the way that we have been taught. It's what has been ingrained in us. And I honestly can say we're all like this. Although I can say that I feel, and these are like those celebrating the wins, I feel like the chains are beginning to break in this area with my daughter. I think in raising her, I became more aware of my tendencies. I became more aware of this when she was a little younger. And then I've just done the work through the years. And I really tried to be diligent about this, recognizing because I understood that everything I was doing is going to then be what my children end up doing as well. But let me tell you, in her 20s, she is leaps and bounds ahead of me in her self growth. And when I look back at her age, I was in the height. I was in the height of it, of all the people pleasing at that point in my life. And she definitely is not. So that is a win. That is a win. But we also have this, or I should say, I always had this fear of judgment. It was this deep rooted fear of judgment, which prevented me from expressing my true self. And this is what can lead to that self censorship and a distorted sense of reality. So let me say this: you do not have to express yourself about everything, you get to choose. And I think the point is you're allowed to have an opinion as long as you're not coming from a place of being mean and terrible. And you're coming from a place of love and respect. And of course, that's just my opinion. That's just my opinion. Because you get to be who you want. And I don't want you thinking that I'm telling you to go out there and say all of the things because otherwise you're being a people pleaser. No, no, no. I am not saying that. I am just saying have discernment. There's a time and a place when you're going to know that you want to speak up, and don't be afraid to do so. I just want to encourage people to be good humans. That's all. There's also this rejection sensitivity, and this is that fear. We talked about that fear of rejection, how it is a really powerful motivator for people pleasers and our behaviors. And it can really start to hinder you building those authentic relationships and having those like really authentic connections. I never wanted to be judged. I especially lived this way in high school and as a young adult, and even as my career as a teacher. I wanted people to like me, and I was very fearful for many others that I would be rejected if I did not agree with them. I remember sitting in rooms and either keeping totally quiet because it just wasn't the right time or place, or finding myself agreeing with people that I would nod my head, I would smile, and it gave them the power to think that I agreed with them because I didn't say I didn't, and I nodded my head, and therefore people thought that I was agreeing, and that's where the chameleon effect came in. And I don't know, it just didn't feel good so many times. And maybe that's part of us just, becoming older and wiser. And I don't know. It's just important to remember that everyone experiences rejection and it is a normal part of life. And we are allowed to have an opinion. We are allowed to have thoughts. But I think we are forgetting how to have those conversations in real time. And that's where it can get tricky. And here's what it can even lead to is this whole idea of like different personas. And this is actually a very common coping mechanism for people pleasers, and it's like wearing different masks to fit into various situations. How many of you experience that? And let me tell you, it's exhausting to maintain like multiple personalities, and I don't mean that literally, but I mean that like in a way that like when you walk into different rooms, you are consciously being a different person. And all of these behaviors are interconnected and often reinforce each other. So when we do one thing, it starts to reinforce another thing. So when we start to understand this, we can start to break free of these cycles and all of the people pleasing. And quite frankly, it is crucial. But it's also really important to question the motives behind our actions. So here is where I would say ask yourself, am I doing this out of genuine love and care? Or is there an underlining sense of resentment or obligation? And then just be really cautious of self justification because sometimes we convince ourselves that our actions are rooted in love, and when in reality, they're driven by fear or a desire for approval. So, I want to circle back to something I mentioned earlier. Since starting this journey of self awareness and breaking free from people pleasing, I've experienced a new found sense of freedom. Now, for those of you that don't know, I've mentioned this before on the podcast. My core value is freedom. And I've realized that people pleasing is its direct opposite. Because you see, when I was a people pleaser, like really being in the chameleon effect, I forfeited that freedom because we start to compromise our own freedom and the freedom of those around us. Because if gaining someone's approval feels like a necessity, then we're going to do anything to get it. And then this gives the person we want to impress absolute control over us. We get easily manipulated. And not only that, but we may begin to try to control the behavior of those that are closest to us. So, going back to what I was talking to you about my family, and especially the women in my family being the people pleasers, please know that it's not just women, it is men too. But if a certain type of family member feels like they have to gain approval, then what starts to happen, and like here's an example. I'm trying to put it into words, okay? What happens is that our actions start to um what's the word I'm looking for? Starts to I want to say like rub off on. It starts to become who our children or our spouses are by like having them toe the line as well. Does that make sense? I hope I'm making sense there. Will compromise not only our own freedom, but also the freedom of those we love. Because when we're showing our kids how to act and behave, we're taking away their freedom as well. Because I'll find myself saying about somebody or maybe a family member, oh, that's just how she is, or that's just how he is. And we just have to accept it. Just don't say anything, all of those things, right? All those tendencies that I was talking about. Sorry, I'm hitting my chin. All of those tendencies that I was talking about, we start to tell that to our children. And then guess what? The cycle continues for both of us. And guess who has the resentment? Me. And then later, my kids. So believe me when I say our kids see it all and they notice it all, even without saying it out loud. It's our actions. It speaks volumes. Of course, our words do too. So here are just some practical steps towards freedom, like true freedom in this is consider your motives. So like I said before, think about, are you doing this out of love? Are you doing it out of pleasing? But also, are you trying to be the best version of yourself, or are you image crafting? Are you trying to craft your image and cultivate those values? When you're feeling that guilt or shame, ask yourself, have I actually violated my values? What are those values? You have to know them. I'm telling you, if that's one thing you do to figure out your values, like your true core values, and you use that as your guide every single time, I am telling you, it will help you to make decisions better. It will equip you to be able to ask those kinds of questions when you're in a situation that you notice you are questioning. You can say, "Have I violated my values?" And if you have, then there's choices to make. Also, think about what brings you delight at your core. Are you pursuing that, or are you pursuing something else when you are in that decision of like, is this people pleasing or is it not? Notice if you're acting out of fear and obligation, and think about whose opinion do you fear? Fight your desire to change others. Please do that. And why is that necessary? Are you actually struggling to manage your own feelings on the inside? Think about that, because you're not going to be able to change others. If that's one thing I can say, especially to anybody that is in a situation where you're thinking you might be able to, please know that you're not. And pay attention to what makes you anxious. Are you believing that you can control someone's reaction if you get it just right? If you say the right thing, if you do the right thing, is that going to make their reaction better? And I want you to think about that, because if it's making you anxious and you're feeling like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I should say this because it may not be the right thing, then guess what? You're trying to control somebody else, and you can't do that. And then also just observe your maturity in that. Where are you giving the responsibility for your own actions, thoughts, and feelings? And where are you giving it to someone else? Focus on your own character. Are you letting yourself be distracted by someone else's potential actions, thoughts, or feelings? And then clarify your own goals. This is the big question. Whose life are you really living? Remember, reclaiming your freedom is a journey. It's not a destination. It's about progress, not perfection. Be kind to yourself, celebrate those victories, and surround yourself with supportive people. You deserve a life that is authentic and fulfilling and free from the chains of the people pleasing. It's so hard to maintain. And I know this was maybe a heavier episode, and you're like, okay, now what do I do? It's just taking that first step. Taking that first step and just looking at where is one area in your life that you might be really showing a trait of that people pleasing, and what can you do to start creating those boundaries? Maybe I always think of teachers just because that was my world for so long, but like, how many of you that are teachers or in any other career that are saying yes to all of the things because you don't want to disappoint anybody and you want to be the best. You want to show people that you care, and you say yes, 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 and then you become resentful. Think about it. We're in the summer right now. Think about what can you do moving into this next school year or walking back into your job. How can you change that so you're not resentful, so you're not exhausted, so you're living your best life? It's okay to say no. There are other solutions, I promise you. So I hope this has helped. And I love hearing back from you guys because I learn from you guys. As a matter of fact, I have started blogging. Clearly, I love long content, and we're going to be putting up these blogs on the Rise to Shine website. So you're going to get to read my thoughts. I am going to continue to add tips and strategies and all of the things that bring value to you. Sometimes you'll hear that a podcast I do, I might do a blog on that, or maybe even the opposite, that I'll blog on something and go, oh my gosh, I need to talk about this on the podcast. But honestly, I would love for you to start weighing in, because this is where I learn, this is where I grow, and this is also where it will help me to figure out what it is that you guys want to hear about and what do you want to talk about? What's on your heart? What's on your mind? So I just want to encourage you to share your experiences, your challenges, and even all of your wins and victories, triumphs. Because what I really want more than anything is to create a supportive community where we feel safe and we can uplift each other and inspire each other. We don't have to agree on everything. That's okay. I want us to all start learning to be able to have those conversations if need be, because here's the thing, your story and what we share can make a difference in the lives of others. Just remember that. So thank you guys for joining me on this journey today, and hang in there, friends. We're going through wild times in our world right now. I'm just going to say my faith in humanity and God are still my grounding force. They really are. And I sometimes have to remind myself when I spiral. That's another thing. But faith is also one of my core values. So I question that. When I'm in the spiral, I go, am I not paying attention to my core value? Have faith, Noelle. All right, you guys, I could seriously go on and on about this forever, but we're going to wrap it up there. I love you guys. And until next time, keep rising, keep shining, and know that the best is yet to come. Thanks for joining me here today. Your presence means the world to me. If you enjoyed what you heard, please consider leaving a rating and review. And don't forget to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. Head to the show notes and let's connect. Rise to Shine Co. is ready to support you in coaching, collaboration, life tips, or even a coffee chat. Until next time, keep shining, my friends.